Arkansas Young Republicans for arranging this. 2012 is an incredibly important year for our country. We're going to make a lot of decisions that are going to have consequences in 2013. Our nation is quickly coming up on another decision point with regards to our debt ceiling, already at $17 trillion, and it's going to go even higher. I'm in this race because I have never stood by when our country was in trouble. From 1991, when our country was going into Desert Storm, and I enlisted in the Marine Corps until after 9/11, we were about to invade Iraq. I've always tried to answer my country's call. And although this is a different kind of problem that our country faces with regard to our economic crisis, I believe that it's rooted in a moral crisis. So I joined this race to make that statement and to be able one day to look at my 5-year-old son who's now 5 years old, and to my daughter who's now 9, and tell them that I did everything that was in my power in order to turn our country around and take it back in the right direction. With that being said, thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Cotton. My name is Tom Cotton. I want to thank you all for coming out today on what's a beautiful day. I know you have a lot of options here in Garland County, and you could have even been deterred by the Corvette Club down the hallway instead of making it all the way here, so we appreciate you being here. I am running for the 4th District Congressional seat, and I don't believe what Barack Obama believes. I don't believe that America needs to be fundamentally transformed, which is what he said a few days before he was elected in 2008. I think America needs to recommit ourselves to our founding principles, things like limited and constitutional government, individual liberty, and the free enterprise system. We have a lot of problems today. We have Obamacare, which is hanging over our heads, threatening our liberties and our healthcare system and our economy. We have a debt that's $15 trillion and growing, a tax system that makes us uncompetitive in the world. And speaking of the world, we have an Iran that's attempting to gain nuclear weapons to use against us and our allies. All these things are not a problem with what makes America great. They're a problem with Barack Obama abandoning what makes America great. If we recommit ourselves to those fundamental principles, we'll once again be great. That's why I'm running for Congress, because I believe in what makes America great. That we're a country that's founded on the principles that you can come to America and you can be an American if you believe in the creed of the Declaration, that all men are created equal, with equal rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness from their Creator. Only in a place like America where you believe in those things can someone like me, the son of a farmer and a school teacher who are at our first debate here for the first time in 7 debates, actually think to run for Congress and serve in the United States government. I want to do that. I want to serve you in Congress. I humbly ask for your vote. I appreciate you taking the time to hear our views today.
Thank you, Mr. Cotton. And now Ms. Rankin.
First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for being here today, taking time on your Saturday to come be a part of this and to hear these candidates as we espouse conservative Republican principles that I believe we all adhere to, and we have a passion for that. That's one of the reasons that I'm trying again for United States Congress, making a second run after 2010, and so many of you in this room helped make that effort possible last year. And I thank you for that. And I'm hoping to build on that and continue to take that conservative message out there, because what we learned in 2010 was when the conservative message was heard, when it was articulated, when it was communicated to people across the 4th Congressional District, guess what? They liked it. They liked it. It's a winning message, because I truly believe the Republican Party is the party of ideas. So if we can communicate and articulate those ideas, I know as a 7th generation Arkansan, I come from a long stock of folks that have always been devoted and determined to make Arkansas the very best that it possibly can. As the daughter of an economist, I understand that at a nearly $17 trillion national debt, we're on the path to bankruptcy. I also know that as a small business owner, we've got to ratchet back those regulations that are literally choking the life out of our free market and free enterprise system upon which this great country was founded. We've got to continue espousing those principles, one idea at a time, one candidate at a time, one election at a time, and one primary at a time. And I just think it's great that you all are here. Thank you for coming and allowing us to express to you who we are, what we believe in, and I am excited to have that opportunity today, and I certainly look forward to this debate. I also want to thank our panelists and the Arkansas Young Republicans for hosting this today.
Thank you, candidates. We will now move into the first round of question and answer, and we'll start with Mr. Jason Tolbert, who will address Mr. Coward.
Mr. Coward, I'll follow up on something you said in your opening statement about the vote on the debt ceiling. That was obviously a huge vote a few months ago in Congress. If you're faced a few months from now as a congressman with a similar type of vote on the debt ceiling, and your party leadership comes to you and says, John, we need you to vote to raise the debt ceiling. We've worked out this compromise. What would they have to do to get your vote? What would compromise could you envision that would allow you to vote to raise the debt ceiling?
We would have to have an ironclad plan for permanent cuts. And when John Cowart says cuts, what I'm talking about are actually actual reductions in spending. Too often we hear that cuts are actually a slowdown in increases. That's Washington speak for cuts. But I want cuts like we use the word cut in Arkansas, actual reductions. And that's got to be laid down absolutely in law so that it would take a supermajority in order to reverse it. So I would have to see something definite saying that we were going to have real cuts in spending, not just discretionary spending, but also entitlement reform. Entitlement reform that's going to save Social Security for my generation. Because right now, no one my age and younger really believes that the system is going to be there for them. John Cowart pretty much grew up knowing that this system was going to go bankrupt. Because as I grew up is when Congress opened the lockbox on Social Security and started spending that money. But now the system is endangered. It's endangered partly because of the number of Americans that are not with us today because they're avoided. 50 million Americans not in the workforce. And the worker to retiree ratio is no longer high enough to sustain the system. So those are the kinds of things that I would have to see in place in order to vote for an increase in the debt ceiling.
Thank you. Mr. Coleman, may I address Mr. Cotton?
Mr. Cotton, money is always a question in all political campaigns. In fact, a lot of the times the front runner is determined more by how much money one has raised than anything else, any other criteria. And in a recent debate, and there's a lot of publicity about the fact that you've been the front runner in raising funds in this particular race. But in a recent debate, there was a question directed to you about how much, to each of the candidates actually, about how much money each candidate raised from within Arkansas. And if I recall correctly, you said that about 50% of your funds had come from within Arkansas and then the rest had come outside of Arkansas. Of course, money's money, and you spend it regardless of where it comes from. But do you think there is a legitimate concern among Arkansans that the money having, so much of the money having come from other interests outside of the state of Arkansas, that you might be compromised in how you represent the district, given the fact that a half or less of the money actually came from within the 4th District that supported your campaign?
No, Curtis, I don't think so. You're right that there's a lot of parts of a winning campaign. Money is one part. The most important part, though, is a conservative vision to get America working again. So plans like passing a balanced budget amendment, repealing Obamacare, reducing taxes, cutting government spending. Money is certainly an important part. I mean, I've raised more money in Arkansas than any of the candidates have. I've raised more right here in Garland and Pine Bluff and El Dorado. Like the other candidates, I've also tried to raise money from outside the state. A lot of that comes from my friends, my network, from school or from the Army, from people like Mike Carroll, who I went to basic training with and officer candidate school with, like Mike Dennison, who deployed with me to Iraq, like Don Rumsfeld, who I served when he was Secretary of Defense while I was in Iraq. And I'm grateful for the support of people all across the country who want to support a veteran who's running for office, just like they support us when we're on active duty. So I think the voters in Arkansas are more concerned about our plans once we get in office than about the administrative and the funding and the logistics of our campaigns.
We have a chip, Mr. Cowart. Can you use that? 30 seconds.
I just want to say, as someone who returned to Arkansas from Afghanistan on January the 30th of this year and started to ramp up my campaign from that point forward, I want to point out that I'm very proud of what the people in my campaign have been able to do. What I'm talking about is doing more with less. Unfortunately, we have a system where office holders spend about 70% of their time raising money and 30% of the time actually doing their job. One thing I want to point out is that John Cowart is a person who's going to spend more time doing his job.
Thank you, Mr. Cowart. All right, Ms. Dry, Ms. Rankin.
number 2 and 3 top employers in this district, and how will your previous professional experiences enable you to adequately represent them in Congress?
You know, one of the things that we look at as a small business owner that I know is that when you look at it in the aggregate, you realize that it's small business that's doing that. And the fastest growing business are single employee businesses. And I feel like those get lost in the shuffle. So one of the things that I want to continue to promote, as I always do, is the ability to encourage people in the entrepreneurial spirit to create their own job. We hear that all the time. Find a job, get a job. Find a job, get a job. It's important as we are teaching and training the American principles to look at our young people today and say, create a job. You know, you may never be on that Fortune 500 list or that Forbes 500 list, but get out there and become an entrepreneur and create the job that is important to helping move this district forward. And I feel like that's an important one. Our top ones would be obviously in the agriculture sector and also in some manufacturing sectors. And I've had a wonderful ability to go out and tour these employers now for the past couple of years, and that's been an exciting thing to see that. Whether you're talking about an Albemarle or the Alliance Rubber Company here in Hot Springs, you're talking about the agriculture in that industry. It's an exciting thing to be able to move that forward. And again, pull government back where individuals are able to create their businesses, start their businesses, and actually survive. Only 50% of entrepreneurs are still in business 2 years later. That statistic was taken several years ago before this current administration, where we now have 109 major regulations coming down the pipe with an impact of $100 million or more, which is quite a costly regulation. We've got to pull those back in order to move forward.
Thank you, Ms. Rankin. Time is up. And we'll shift gears to Mr. Coleman, who will ask Mr. Coward.
Thank you, Jack. And John, I ask you this question, and we're going to stay on the money for a little bit here because I think it's a critical subject. In your last report, in your last filing, you were trailing the other two candidates significantly, understanding in the fact that you got in the race significantly later than they did. That notwithstanding, how are you going to be able to continue, or will you be able to continue in the last 4 or 5 weeks of the primary period to compete with a significant disparity in the amount of money you've raised to date in this race?
The ultimate judges of whether or not I'm communicating the message of who I am and what I intend to do are going to be the voters on May 22nd. In the meantime, as I said, I'm proud that my campaign has been doing more with less, and that we've got out a plan in place to advertise across the district. We've campaigned in every county in the district, and I think that the short answer to your question is yes. Coming in when I did into the race, we had an uphill battle, but every week gets better and better, both in terms of volunteers and in terms of fundraising. And I have to point out that while the people seated to my left have succeeded over the past year in raising more money than I have, I mean, Don Rumsfeld is probably not going to answer my phone calls, much less contribute to my campaign. I do want to point out that I'm not trailing when it comes to all of the Democrats. We know that somebody in the Democratic race can use their own money, but I'm not the last person amongst all the primary candidates.